In early March 2021, a man in his 40s from Kent, South England, is calling a vet about his sick dog and then taking his wife and kids out for a picnic in the woods. Psychological experts say that with that trip to the woods, Police Constable Wayne Couzens was deriving a sense of dominion. I think this means that Couzens got a thrill from knowing that his family didn't know that they were treading where he had trodden on his way a few days before to dump the remains of 33-year-old marketing executive Sarah Everard, who he'd kidnapped, raped and strangled, while he, of course, did. Can we learn anything about why Couzens did what he did? Now viewer, if I've got you hooked on the story so far, do subscribe, give the video a like, drop a comment when you're ready and donate. Hit the thanks button below, I'll appreciate you. A fan of violent bondage porn, Couzens didn't, on the night of the 3rd of March 2021, randomly come across Sarah. He had, weeks beforehand, made 3 trips from Kent, his home, to London to scope out locations where he wouldn't stand out and where there were likely to be women walking the streets at night alone. He'd booked the hire car that he'd travelled in days before, presumably in a fake name, since not using his own car was meant to enable him to cover his tracks. Likewise, the handcuffs that he used on Sarah weren't from his job. They were from Amazon. He'd again ordered them weeks before. Couzens' abduction of Sarah was captured on the dashcam of someone's car. The driver later revealed that he had thought virtually nothing of it. It had to be the case of an undercover police officer making an arrest. As Couzens bundled Sarah, who he'd since placed into the handcuffs that he'd bought, into his fake police vehicle, Sarah was, one imagines, under the impression that she was about to be taken to a local police station in order to be fined, or something, for breaching lockdown rules. Couzens had his COVID script, where he would tell his victim that walking the streets was a breach of COVID regulations and that he was necessarily placing them under arrest, fully rehearsed.
She thought that she was walking home from seeing a friend, that she'd bent lockdown rules, and so when she was stopped by a police officer showing her his ID with a pair of handcuffs, asking her, well, we don't know what he said, but presumably asking her to get into his car.
But if he wouldn't have been a police officer, she wouldn't have got in the car.
She trusted that, as any one of us would.
By the time Couzens subsequently got to Dover with his victim, he hadn't yet killed her. What he had done, many agree, was to show Sarah that he was up to no good, to put it mildly. Commentators imagine that Sarah would have been pleading for her life in a thorough state of shock and distress. With her hands cuffed together behind her back though, she was wholly defenceless against Couzens. We can't say at what point exactly on the 2-hour drive from London to Dover Sarah realised that the police officer at the wheel had tricked her. We imagine though that she was asking herself why. Just as we are. We're getting to that. According to experts, Couzens' casual behaviour after raping and murdering Sarah, including, you may recall, calling the vet for his dog and taking his family out to the woodland where he had dumped Sarah's body, is classic psychopathic behaviour. Couzens remained unruffled by what he had done because he had loved every minute of it. In the woods with his family, he was literally enjoying having got away with it, as well as getting a buzz from keeping the evil secret of the woods, if you will, from his family.
He got a thrill from what he did, the planning of it, the actual taking place, the abduction, and up until for a week, the getting away with it, he would have been absolutely thrilled with himself. He took his children to the place where he had taken Sarah's body. To him, again, the biggest thrill going, I'm getting away with this, and look, I'm literally taking my children there.
Immediately after the murder, Couzens was known to go about his normal daily activities. He went and got a coffee and cake, and in those following days he called the vets, go on a walk, take his children out. So we have to remember that someone like Couzens has this very, very rich fantasy life, and he's used to switching his personality, this persona, on and off. So he's this person at work, he's this person at home. He would have been thinking about this crime for a long, long time. How can someone literally murder someone and then go and get a coffee an hour later? But for him, he'd replayed that in his mind so many times. It was just the act. He did what he needed to do, and so back to normal life I go.
In keeping with this, many agree that if Couzens hadn't been caught for Sarah's murder, he would have kept killing. He raped and murdered Sarah in a rural area northwest of Dover, where he'd taken Sarah after switching to his own car, which he'd forced Sarah into on arriving at Dover.
Do you think, in your opinion, that he would be classed as a psychopath?
I think that if he were to complete an assessment, he'll come out pretty high on that. And so, yeah, from where I'm sat, and I haven't been able to interview him or assess him, I would say that he would be classified as having antisocial personality disorder or psychopathy, because he certainly shows the traits of that kind of way of functioning. That's not an excuse, though.
Wayne Couzens is a narcissistic psychopath. He's also pretty stupid. A bus camera had captured his interaction with Sarah. The car hire centre had cameras that captured his visits there. His car captured Sarah's blood and his semen. How could a police officer of around 20 years not have foreseen all those things? Not that anyone, except him, is actually complaining that he did overlook those matters. When, on the 9th of March 2021, the police, that's the honest, non-kidnapper, non-rapist, non-murderer police, came calling, Couzens was clearly unprepared. For the previous 6 days, he believed he'd got away with murder. I've said that Couzens is stupid, as have many others. In defence of the ludicrous explanation that he offered the police of what he did with Sarah, though, he'd had to make it up on the spot. According to Couzens, he handed Sarah over to a gang of sex traffickers who he owed big time and who he didn't dare cross.
I am in financial and I've been lent on by I don't know who they are. They're a group, a gang, whatever, and they told me, right, I need to go and pick up girls and give them to them. So I said, what's happening? And it then came through that they're going to harm my family, take them away, and they'll use them instead. At that point I had no option to try and find somebody.
About them. I need to find them. Tell me everything you know that I hope that you'll help me.
There was a white Sprinter van. They it was between sort of Lenham, Maidstone area that I dropped her off. I still don't know. I don't know. They just I just parked my car up, and then the van come up behind me, flashed me. They all jumped out, and then they took this girl. They said, you've done good, and I don't know whether my family's going to be alright still. But
yeah, alright. But how do they contact you? How did you contact them?
I tried to take over on one of their call girls and rip her off. So she's told them, and they've got me. So
how do they? No, but how do they contact you? How is it they've been in contact with you to make these threats?
They just tell me, be here. So Hotel Burston down in Folkestone, got to be here. Okay, so I turned up. But I've got no mobile number, and they have got my mobile number. They're obviously outside watching, following. I just, honestly.
How are they telling you to be there? How is it they're giving those directions?
Yeah, they'll come outside. So they'll be outside here.
Yeah.
And then they'll say, right, you're going to be in Folkestone at this time, or you're going to be in Ashford at this time.
As far as I'm aware, in the 2 occasions on which, in February 2021, only days before he did what he did to Sarah Everard then, Couzens flashed the staff at a McDonald's, he was off duty. He was on duty, and presumably in uniform too, when, in November 2020, he exposed his genitalia to a female cyclist on a rural lane near Deal in Kent. He actually did more than flash the woman.
The first of the offences in time involved A, who was cycling up a narrow country lane between Deal and Dover on the 13th of November 2020 at around 2:30 in the afternoon. Photographs of the lane in question show that it has a banked verge up one side with some woodland at the top. As A cycled up, a man stepped out from the trees. He was naked, energetically masturbating, his erect penis looking directly into A's eyes as he did so. The victim personal statements of A, B and C, read in court just now, speak justly of their shock and upset at this defendant's selfish, sexually aggressive acts.
As shown earlier, extreme porn addict and flasher Police Constable Wayne Couzens, who was nicknamed in his job the Rapist, kidnapped, raped and strangled Sarah Everard after weeks of planning and preparation for nothing other than sadistic pleasure. His prior occasions of flashing were effectively part of his preparation for raping and murdering. On not being caught for his flashing, the visible shock, horror and disgust that it caused to his victims having undoubtedly given him a thrill, Couzens considered himself untouchable.
There's talk about him exposing himself a couple of days or a couple of weeks before he abducted Sarah in such terrible, terrible circumstances. And these are what we would traditionally call gateway offences. He's trying it out. I've worked with sex offenders, plenty of sex offenders, and they don't just start, or rarely will they just start and do the terrible things that they do, the murders, the abductions. But what they do is they will try it out, they will test it out, they will test the system out. He was exposing himself in a local McDonald's to where he lived down in southeast Kent. And to him, nothing really was done. So he got away with it. And that added to his, I've heard a defence, if there is such a thing in such an awful case, saying about his addiction to violent bondage porn. That, coupled with that, would have just given him the impetus to plan and premeditate what he did.
Couzens lost the appeal against his whole life prison sentence that he made in 2022. He's going to spend the rest of his life behind bars. If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.